This is me and my grandparents. I really miss them. I got to spend a lot of time with them because my parents were divorced, and my mom worked nights, and so I'd go over there after school, and I would listen to them and the stories they would tell about what it was like and how different it was when they grew up, when they were kids. My grandmother always loved to put out extra food, a lot of food, at family gatherings, and I found out it was because they were from a farming family. And it was because they lived through the Dust Bowl and the Depression. And they never knew during those times if they would even have another meal or where that meal was going to come from. I was so horrified 2 years after that picture that these are the images that started coming through on TV. You're like, what, isn't famine and death, wasn't that something that they experienced hundreds of years ago? The fact that Ethiopian kids that were my same age were dying simply because they didn't have food, it was just too much to bear. And it was so great to have rock stars that I loved at the time, not just come together to sing We Are the World and do a little kumbaya, but to really spread light into a place. We didn't have the internet. We didn't know what was going on the other side of the world and the atrocities that were happening. And it was then that I said, I'm going to dedicate my life to being part of the solution and not part of the problem. So I ran off and I got my public policy degrees and went straight into politics and had the great fortune to work at the local, state, and federal level. And I got to meet and work with the top political leaders, not just in our country, but around the world. And after 10 years, I sat back and I said, aren't we spending too much time on partisan politics and grabs for leadership and left, right, and this and that? And it's like, I knew that there was a better conversation that we needed to be having. There was a more important conversation we needed to be having. And that was, even today, our lowest income earners are spending almost every dime they make just to live, right? Our neighbors, people in our community, much less around the world, just to live, every dime that they're spending. So I've now dedicated my time and my career to the advancement of technology for the betterment of society. And I'm here to say that I believe that we're on the cusp of the most fascinating, exciting time in all of humanity. And what I'd say is, let's start with talking about the world. And people say we live in an overpopulated world, but in fact, it's not true. It's the scarcity of resources. It's not the overpopulation. And this graph alone shows, literally, you could take everybody around the world and we could all live in the state of Texas side by side, 1,000 square foot for every man, woman, and child. Hard to believe, right? And how are we going to do that? Because today, 1.2 billion people don't have homes. But it's through technology. This home that you're looking at was printed in one day for less than $10,000, right? The homes of the future will be printed, and they'll look however you want them to look. And customization will no longer mean, millions of dollars or more. It'll be the same raw materials, just printed a different way. The Netherlands is launching an entire community next year that's 3D printed and sustainable. But you say that's going to take a lot of energy, right? Well, guess what we have an abundance of? Each and every day, more energy freely falls to the earth than we, as all of humanity, use in the entire year. But we just haven't been able to capture it before. We haven't been able to store it, and we haven't been able to distribute it around. And guess what comes with energy? And abundant energy is abundant water. The planet's 2/3 water. We've never had a water issue. We've had a salt issue. But with abundant energy, we can desalinate water, making it abundant. And guess what abundant water gives you? Is abundant food. And now we can build new structures, actually print new structures if we want. Vertical farms, of course we could do traditional agriculture, but we could live side by side with local, available, healthy, cheap food right literally in our backyard of our 9-story vertical tower. And how are we going to get around? Today, getting around is one of the most dangerous things you can do. Each year, 1.2 million people die. That's the same number that died in that Ethiopian famine. They die every year in auto accidents. and autonomous driving is on the verge, and it's going to make us safe. The great new technologies like Hyperloop being constructed right now. So pneumatic tube, you go 700 miles an hour like the old bank tubes, except now it's safe and cheap, right? And this will take us from Orlando to Miami in 26 minutes. This is not a picture of me. But the sensors that are coming out right now will read our health and our vital stats in real time, and no longer will you have to wait for a heart attack or stroke. But for us or a loved one goes, oh, that was a problem, right? So think of this. What if we were basic need secure? Where would you go? Who would you become? What kind of art would you make? We're so close to one of the greatest things ever, and that is each of us holding the world's information in our hand. And so many of us today have that, but we're on the cusp of giving it to the entire world. All 8 billion people we're going to be able to connect with and educate and collaborate and solve the challenges of the future. It's such an exciting time. And what I would challenge each of us today is not to fall prey to the pessimism of mainstream media and the dark side of social media. We live in one of the greatest times ever. And if we embrace these technologies and give them to the world, it'll be a beautiful future. Thank you so much.